Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Becky Sullivan, and I'm the project lead for the Literacy Coaches and Reading Specialists Educator Training, or LCRSET grant at the Sacramento County Office of Education. We are thrilled to have so many of you join us for this webinar series with Dr. Daryl Michel. The goal of the LCRSET grant is to develop training and provide professional development for educators to become literacy coaches and reading specialists and provide support to the LEAs that received the LCRS allocations. The LCRSET program will support the State Superintendent of Public Instruction's goal of all California students reading on grade level by third grade. In this four-part webinar series, Dr. Daryl Michel will take a deep dive into his book, Student-Focused Coaching. He'll share with us how to get started with student-focused coaching, the different roles you will play as a coach, and what the work entails, how to keep momentum and build sustainability, and sharing the leadership. For today's webinar, Dr. Michel will discuss getting started with student-focused coaching by building clarity with the roles, responsibilities, building relationships with teachers, and discussing the administrator and coach partnerships. We have a really special treat for all of the participants from the LCRS grant schools. You will each be receiving Dr. Michel's book, Student-Focused Coaching. If you signed up for the book at our August coach convening, those are being mailed out this week. If you were not at our coach convening, you can sign up for the book today through the link in the chat. And now, please welcome Jessica Hammond, our partner from Glean Education.
Thank you so much, Becky. We are thrilled to partner with SCOE and the LCRSET Grant Initiative to coordinate this webinar series. For those of you who may not know us, we are Glean Education, and we partner with schools, districts, and states to deliver online training, school leader consulting, and web-based coaching. Our work aims to build educator knowledge of evidence-based literacy practices to improve student literacy outcomes. Next slide, please. This webinar is the first in a series of 4 webinars this year on student-focused coaching. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the SCOE website, which will be linked in the chat. Slides and resources can be found on the LCRSET Expert Webinar Padlet, link also in the chat. Next slide, please. For this webinar, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Daryl Michel. Dr. Michel's education began in the mid-1990s as a classroom teacher in the Northside Independent School District in San Antonio, Texas. His experience and opportunities led to roles in instructional coaching and leadership, with a research-based program developed at Johns Hopkins University, as well as opportunities to collaborate with educators on a national level. In 2005, Daryl returned to Texas, where he completed his PhD in Education School Improvement at Texas State University. He now continues to work in instructional coaching at Be a Change, while also working as a staff member at the Meadows Center at UT Austin. He is the author of Student-Focused Coaching with Jan Hasbrook and has other works in progress. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Daryl Michel.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that introduction. I'm excited to be here, excited to take us on this journey, this coaching journey that I love and live in each and every day. So as Jessica said, as we get started here with the webinar series and go along throughout today and even other sessions, is feel free to pose questions. We'll try to have some time at the end where we can respond to some questions, but we're gonna dive right in here and get ourselves going with our content. So our working agenda, this is how I always like to proceed, with a working agenda, without those minute-by-minute timestamps. Working agenda as we move. So learning about the differentiated sustained professional learning and importance of that, how we really think about prioritizing and how we focus on our own a specific area of concern. Revisit some of the work that or some of the information that Jan presented during the last webinar about student-focused coaching. And then we'll spend some time here on communication. such an important topic in all things related, at least to student-focused coaching, of verbal and nonverbal communication, and then have some conversation about the importance of that administrator-coach partnership. So in many cases, without leader support, many of us likely can realize or understand how coaching can take a turn really quickly if we don't have that targeted support from our leaders. So Jessica introduced and gave much of the work here that I've done. There is a second book in press right now called Instructional Leadership Through Student-Focused Coaching, co-authored with Dawn Brookhart, that we hope will be out in the spring of 2025. So that's exciting. But all of these things, I put this up here in terms of this 30-year journey to show that coaching has been such a big part of my education experiences for nearly 25 years. So from mathematics education, which K-12 literacy is really my background area, my minor area, but Johns Hopkins was all work in mathematics. And so having the opportunity to provide coaching, more of the technical coaching support around a program, the West Ed work in California there, but I'm not in California, I'm in Texas, but get to work with secondary teachers of all subject areas, coaching and really thinking about how we can all focus in on disciplinary literacy practices at the secondary level, routines. And then, of course, as Jessica said, all of this other work where I get to really stay in the school systems as we think about multi-tier system of supports. And so faculty that I get to work with in the staff role at UT, it's showing this to say, yeah, 20-something years of coaching. And boy, I still have so much to learn. So when I say about, having this as coaching book and a second book, it's like, it doesn't mean that I'm the knower of all things coaching. And I'm certainly not the expert and I've got all the answers, because that's certainly not what coaching is all about. It's how we think about being peers. And I thought here in this case to start off, because it's so much about the work that all of you likely find yourself in of, there's all of this research with the science of reading. There's this simple view of reading. There's structured literacy. Each of these coming with so much that we have to consider. When we think about the science of reading and the thought of decades of research that continues to evolve and continues to take us in the path of what we know in terms of teaching reading, there's a lot here. The decades worth of this research that I can't possibly know all of that, nor would we think any coach could possibly know all of this. So when we think about really getting ourselves focused, that hey, science of reading, we need to have that background in the knowledge base. We also have to realize very quickly that a quick 45-minute or 60-minute session on the science of reading would say, we do science of reading. Probably not the case. When you think about all of this with the simple view of reading, when we think of Scarborough's The Reading Rope and how all of those skills associated with Scarborough's Rope, the skills in language comprehension, the skills in word recognition, the skills still here within skilled reading, there's the reading comprehension. There's a lot of skills there as well. So where do we start with all of this knowledge? Or even this, we could take from the International Dyslexia Association of how they define structured literacy. And so putting all this up at the forefront of this work, to really think that as coaches, being realistic in terms of the type of support that we provide, how we provide the support, the additional learning that we might have to do ourselves to really get grounded in the research and the evidence, and how we make things manageable then for the teachers and the leaders whom we're working with. We can't do it all at one time. There's no way that's going to work. So how do we make things manageable for everyone? So where do you start? Well, I think part of this comes from what's the priority? And we could probably all ask ourselves or just think about our own systems right now or organizations to think about, what what is it that we are working on? If you think about some of the work that Simon Sinek did in his in his TED talk about the why, like why why does your school, your organization exist? And what is it that you actually do, and how do you know what what to do? It's interesting when I think about those circles that he talks about, and how, yeah, we can often say, yeah, as a coach, this is what I do. How I know what to do, maybe I can answer it, but that real why we do this kind of work, maybe those are some of the questions that still remain. But I think here when Doug Reeves uh, stated this, that while focus alone is not a sufficient strategy for school improvement, it is a prerequisite for improvement. And my work and my PhD in education school improvement certainly can understand that there's a lot that we could focus on. We have to really figure out what is that. Well, we can figure out, I think, often when thinking about a priority or an area of focus, then understanding and being able to have these real honest conversations that just because we say we're shifting to the science of reading doesn't mean that within a year we're all going to be experts in it, or structured literacy, or the simple view of reading. How Shirley Hord and Jean Hall was well before still 2015 talking about change and organizational development. And when they say 3 to 5 years, you think, that's a long time. We don't have 3 to 5 years. Well, if we don't get focused, it's going to take certainly probably longer than that, because we might find ourselves continuously making changes along the way, which is never really a good idea, because people often then find that, do people making these decisions know what they're doing? Do we start to lose confidence in some of the decisions that are made? So really getting ourselves grounded in the priority and the focus, and really trying to stick with it. What is this why? What is this thing that's going to help our organization move forward and really think change here? Now, I cite a number of individuals here at the bottom of the next part when we think about priority and we think about getting focused. And that's from Michael Fulham and Joanne Quinn. It's from Jan and my work, and it's from Lee, who I'll talk more about later on with her a 9-year longitudinal study. But of all of these, we would find that really thinking about our priority and our area of focus, and that it takes time, is that shared vision. Now, the vision can't be decided just by one person or a small group of people. We really need to think about involving all levels of the organization. Who's part of setting this vision? And if we can get ourselves to this place where we really do have a priority or an area of focus, that vision then really could help to get us to think then about when we come together for opportunities to collaborate with our colleagues, hey, we have a real emphasis here in terms of what it is we're coming together for. We could think about, if we have this shared vision and we have a direction where we're headed, we could start to think about the different reforms, resources, or strategies maybe that we have access to, and are they all needed? There are such things as we abandon, or as I heard recently here from a former superintendent, that we strategically subtract things. So we don't have necessarily abandon, but we can put some things away. How many things do we really need? And if we get ourselves to this place too about really getting this shared vision and know the direction we're going and what's going to be our priority, we can really start then thinking about what are the goals here that we're really going to be honed in on. Are there duplicate efforts that we need to remove to make it easier on the end user? And if we have this real priority, providing that ongoing job embedded support, that's what coaches do. Coach, main things. We provide that differentiated and sustained professional learning for our peer colleagues. So if we then think about, with professional development or professional learning, not synonymous terms here, that when we think about this from the lens of a coach, you have this Boston Consulting Group, the study, Hargreaves and O'Connor, uh, talking about these two big ideas, but there are others who have studied this as well. That we can go to a professional development session, which we could say that this is right now today. If this is your one and only, yep, I came to this, I learned more about student-focused coaching. Well, this might get you motivated and inspired, or it might add a bit to your knowledge base about coaching, or at least student-focused coaching. It's it's not likely to result in any kind of long-term use or any kind of adopting of student-focused coaching. It's too quick. It's not enough. There's no real demonstration, practices, or additional study within our own system. So here are some examples on the left of professional development that, again, can be inspiring and motivating. On the right, though, is how can we take, starting from professional development, and then continuing our professional learning. So we can start with a session, just like this is for all of you who will be part of the entire series. Hey, you got started with Jan, and now you have 4 additional sessions over time. We can continue this learning trajectory and continue to educate and deepen your own knowledge base about student-focused coaching and coaching in general. So when we look at some of the seminal research, especially on the left-hand side, when you look at what Joyce and Showers concluded in 1982, that what it takes for an individual to learn about and implement a new skill or strategy. Notice it doesn't say 5 new initiatives or 3 new programs. It's to learn about and implement a new skill or strategy. So again, back to what's the priority? What's the real focus? What's going to have the biggest impact on your system? And if you trust the process and stay the course, what could this really do for not only how we educate and support our educators and leaders, but the ultimate, our indirect uh, uh, impact that we have on student learning. So if you look on that left-hand side to see what they concluded here, this work started in the late 70s, 20 to 30 hours of additional study about the skill or strategy, the demonstrations, and the practice. So if we're looking for that long-term use, you can then see over on the right-hand side with that table of Bruce Joyce and Emily Calhoun then in 2010 to say, hey, that's going to take a lot of coaching support. So we get to continue to study the rationale. We get to continue to see demonstrations. We get to continue to practice with the support of our coach. Not that the coach is the expert and knows everything. A coach can help us to really organize and establish some time for this to happen. Sometimes with the practice sessions, best to bring in a small group of students. And imagine here before we go, hey, everybody's going to do this new thing that we want to purchase, that we start small and we focus and build on a few individuals who are really eager and open. We can build capacity and allow them to be our positive testimonials for others. If we have and bring in students who might represent our diverse classroom context, English learner, second language learner, gifted and talented, inclusion, we could get a really solid group of students here around where we can practice and we can start to really see how something works or doesn't work or things we need to change. Well, it's best to make some of those modifications then up front before we say, let's spend millions on something new. So how we can continue as coaches to stay in this space. Now, where would you find the time to do all of this? Well, some people might think that amount of time is impossible. There's no way that we could have all that additional study time for the demonstrations or the practice. And I don't know, I would argue otherwise. I think often in some systems that there's a lot of time. It's how time is used. And in some cases here, if we went back to this concept, and what most of us would understand and think about with Rick DeVore and colleagues that, yeah, professional learning communities, they kind of, it's their names that are often associated here. Shirley Hord, though, if we looked in organizational development work, we'd find even earlier from that her work and research around learning communities and how important it is for us to have colleagues who are working together. So this concept has been around for decades. Yet sometimes, and in some different organizations or schools, kind of takes on a different definition in some places. I like to come back to this in terms of thinking about what some of Hattie said recently, and we know the strong effect sizes here about collective efficacy. Certainly, what he has learned from these large scale meta analyses is this evidence of impact on students from professional learning. But that's us together. That's ongoing learning, not a one time, but sustained learning where we can really work through some of the things that we're challenged with. We can go and implement and test out, as he says, the efficacy of this work. We don't have to do a quick training and then say we're going to now monitor and check what you're doing with fidelity. Well, I need more opportunities to learn before often implementing something with fidelity, whatever that even means. And then what are the artifacts that people could bring back if we really thought about an ongoing professional learning community as a school and or a district, like DeFore and colleagues actually defined in their previous work, including the late DeFore's work here on Learning by Doing in the 3rd edition, that we see a PLC as a larger organization, not the individual teams that comprise it. While the collaborative teams are an essential part, the sum is greater than the individual parts. We believe it's helpful to think of the school or the district as the PLC, and the various collaborative teams as the building blocks. It's much more than a meeting. Requires people to act on the new information. I think this is something that we can't say enough of what is the big umbrella. If it's a school-wide professional learning community, what is it? What are we really working on? And what does everybody below that know about? And how can just that one big priority or focus support us in continuing to think about study, demonstrations, practice? Well, so there's professional learning communities that could be organized around maybe this topic. I, as probably many people would be like, why would you study meetings in schools? I could tell you what meetings in schools are like from my experiences. I found it just fascinating to work with schools here in this qualitative study many years ago. My dissertation published in 2011 around meetings in schools, and in this case around faculty meetings. It's like just the thought that if we were to have something that was grounded in student data, and then we collected this additional evidence, how not only could we have this big umbrella idea of professional learning communities around this priority, but imagine then if we had leaders who created those conditions for the learning, who modeled their own learning during a faculty meeting, who allowed for grade level meetings or department meetings to also be these opportunities for that study, for the demonstrations, for the practice. So it can be, certainly from the learning on my part, it can be more participatory if we're willing to open up the space, and if we're willing to open up and give agency to all individuals in the system. And that means we can't just think of upper levels of a hierarchy making decisions. We really have to think about all levels here through different data collection, which I'll talk more about. So student-focused coaching then, as an approach, Jan would have introduced this in the first session in August about student-focused coaching, how we define this as a cooperative, ideally collaborative, this professional relationship. Colleagues who are mutually engaged, what we're trying to do is to really think about where different individuals are coming from, the skills and knowledge they bring, how we can build on that knowledge. It's like an appreciative inquiry, an asset-based approach, building on what people are already doing and not a deficit mindset or thinking that, yep, we need to do, everybody needs a one-size-fits-all approach because we don't know how to do this. Well, maybe some people do, and maybe thinking about this through that appreciative inquiry lens and really thinking, but what are we doing already? And how do we continue to build our system as a way to improve on what we've done to continue to enhance student learning? We think of this as well as a coach, not only in the student-focused coaching book, but then the second book about instructional leadership is that really we have to think about, in my viewpoint, coaches have to be more than just one individual. Coaches could be grade level leads or department chairs, aspiring leaders. Who are we building capacity in? Because if I think that all things are going to come through me as the coach, or if I am someone expects me to be the holder of all things literacy because I'm a literacy coach, well, what happens when the funding goes away and I don't have my position? Successful school reform research would tell us that when we start a new reform or a new initiative, we should be thinking about sustainability from day one. So that would mean for everyone here involved with this grant, with this project, I'm hoping you're already thinking about sustainability. What's going to happen when there isn't funding? Whose capacity have we built to sustain this coaching work? I find that to be just a really exciting opportunity for coaches to not only be in the present, yet also really helping to build the capacity of so many others to be able to continue to sustain the work. Jan as well would have shared just a couple of things here quick, that student-focused coaching, not an expertise model. Teachers have full control. It's all about students. And that cycles is not really the approach that we've taken in student-focused coaching. Sure, if specifically requested by a peer colleague, no problem. But clinical supervision lies in the space and the research of the 1970s, really with little to no modifications. And many of you this might resonate with you, is that, yep, coaching, what it includes is a pre-conference and observation and a post-conference. That's our coaching. That's a coaching cycle. Well, for some people, that might work. But for many people, as Joyce and Showers also removed feedback from their peer coaching model in the mid-1990s because teachers were feeling as though giving feedback to their peer colleagues was becoming and feeling more evaluative in nature. So removing that as feedback to each other rather is about questions. You could go into any classroom and what did you learn? What can you use? You could probably step into any classroom and, good or bad, walk away or be thinking about something you could use or you would do differently. There's also this part that I think is important from the Joyce and Showers work and in those mid-1990s that when we think about giving feedback to someone. So I think it's important for all of us as coaches in our spaces to think, do I have the technical expertise to provide someone with feedback? So if I sat in the same training as Jessica did, but somehow now I am the expert and everybody should come to me for what to do next, I'm not really the technical expert here. We're learning together. We're peer colleagues. So that's the other part to really think about when we're in these and employing cycles. Just keep that at the forefront of your mind. If I'm giving feedback, do I have the technical expertise to be doing that? It's about positive, trusting relationships. The two cornerstones that we would find in research about what is coaching anyway. Two cornerstones is about trust and confidentiality. They're essential. So getting permission to share if something's working well from someone is important. That's a trusting relationship. It's confidential. Not everybody wants you sharing the things that they're doing. Different philosophical beliefs are okay. Probably most of us on this Zoom call here right now, would have different philosophies of education. Maybe some things that overlap, and that's okay. We don't have to have the same philosophies, but we can continue to educate each other, teaching and learning each other as peer colleagues of what we could learn from the research and the evidence. But we're still in this non-evaluative, non-judgmental space as professional relationships. The other part within the coaching that I think within student-focused coaching and for anyone in this space as a coach is that when you've figured out and identified a specific priority or focus, what I can now do to continue my own teaching and learning. I don't have to go out now and to try to learn everything about the science of reading or everything about the simple view of reading or everything about structured literacy. If we have a priority, I can start really digging in and learning about the research and evidence for a priority or maybe two, and then continuing to teach others. We're working together as the mutual engaged part of the definition would tell us, and that we are equal players. We might happen to have different titles, but we're equal players in the space of coaching. So when we think then about our own work and how are we supporting different individuals, coaching is not about there's a one-size-fits-all approach. Everybody gets the same thing. It's really trying to understand, even if we have that large-scale professional learning community, who needs what. And some people are going to want the coaching more than other people. So being cognizant of where do I spend my time? Do I spend more of my time trying to get those reluctant and resistant people to come on board and get frustrated? Well, maybe not. I will always keep my pulse on every teacher and everyone with the school, but I might really hone my efforts or some of those early adopters, eager and open, and let them do some of the work for me. Share with people these positive testimonials. What's it like to work with a coach, me in particular? So that helps us to really think, I think, then when we are able to share in this work, is that not only is it shared decision making, but if a teacher is taking control of a lot of this work, just think of how authentic the conversations can be. Think of having some ownership grounded in student data and additional evidence, not a free-for-all, but how we could really help maybe get that sense for people to be more motivated and inspired. And then again, we keep building capacity in others. So general goals here is coaching is all about students. So we want to ground all of our decisions here, at least in the student-focused coaching model. That's not true for all models, but grounding our work in student data and evidence, and how, if we can do this, we can really be true partners. We can really learn from each other. Then maybe when individuals are faced with similar problems in the future, they will have learned more from our conversation and our work together, that preventing future problems or being at least equipped to be able to work through problems on their own. Another thing that Jan probably covered here, and I'll do a little more in terms of a dive with each of these, is the thought of these three roles. Facilitator, as we define this, which might be different than some people's definition of facilitator, but thinking about facilitator as someone who helps to make things easier for people. So yeah, helping people find a missing workbook or to run a report for a data meeting. Of course, teachers would find that helpful. Most people would. Or giving a tip or supporting people to be effective and successful with management tip. Yes, of course, all of those things could help make things easier. Not where I want to spend my time, though. If we keep thinking about coaching is about providing differentiated, sustained professional learning for our peer colleagues. And the more we get lost in the weeds of the logistics and let me do this and I'll find this, the more we're taken away from the true essence of coaching. Understanding, yes, as a facilitator in student-focused coaching, if I really understand existing systems, think how much easier that could make things. Though people know I'm not layering anything on top of something, I want to be part already of systems that we have in place. And building relationships. Yes, I'm always building relationships, but I can't sit back and just wait for people to come to me. And I can't just spend all my time building relationships with, and that's all I'm doing. There's no time to waste here. Students continuing to think about enhancing their learning and building their own success as readers, as writers, etc. So I'm building relationships, but I have to get to the real work. And the collaborative problem solver role really can be one of those places that from my work and support with schools across the country, and also right now in with a randomized control trial study with La Trobe University in Australia with Drs. Pam Snow and Tanya Seri, is this opportunity here too to really try to examine a problem that might exist, and then how we work through that additional data. We're going to do more of a dig here on this in a moment. But once we can identify a specific area that we want to work on, then again, here I am, teacher learner. I now get to do all of this additional learning. I get to help teach people. I get to really ground all of the work that I do as a coach in the research and the evidence that's out and available. I might have a small group of individuals who eager and open and want to work with me as we take and examine our own curriculum materials, resources. If we have something like, let's say, general academic vocabulary as an area that we're trying to really work on, that's going to be our priority. Well, let's look at our core reading program. Let's look at ecology in classrooms. Let's look at additional resources. Let's see how it is that we're going about teaching general academic vocabulary. So we can have other individuals who really want to be part of this, building their capacity again in studying. Are there things that need to be supplemented, or do we feel pretty good in terms of what our program has to offer? And then it's how I can always be offering workshops or seminars, but not just any seminar or workshop. It's around our priority or our area of focus. Now, of all of this, of every single thing here within student-focused coaching, we have to think about communication. And so such an essential skill for everything that we do. Zenger and Folkman in this Harvard Business Review in 2016, if interested in this, write about these levels. And when you start to think about these different levels in terms of a hierarchy here, when I think about levels of listening, level number one, I need to have a safe space. So coach, teacher, we have principals, we have other administrators involved in this, that if we're going to have difficult, complex, emotional issues that we want to discuss, there has to be a safe space. And if we don't have that safe space, well, it's going to be hard to get to the other levels. So safety, trust, confidentiality, established first. Such an important piece in our coaching roles. Level two, that we clear away distractions. Now, when we think about if you're sitting with someone, a teacher, a group of teachers, you're at a faculty meeting, whatever it might be, that if my focus is on the other person, then my focus has to be on the other person. It can't be on, let me type this one email. Let me look and send a quick text out to people. Oh, you know what? I have this Apple Watch and that lights up, so I got to check on that really quick. Distractions, one, don't model good behaviors in terms of what good listeners do. but it also really takes your attention away from individuals. So clearing away distractions, how important that is. Number three, level three, being able to listen to what's being said and to ask questions. When we think about this, when you're really attuned to someone and this level of listening, that you're able to capture their ideas. You're asking questions based on what you heard, what they said. You're able to restate issues to confirm that you've understood. So level three takes some real concerted effort here in terms of really listening to different messages. Number four, level four, being aware of nonverbal cues. This can often be tricky for some individuals. If you think about when we're talking about being aware of people's nonverbal cues, what's happening on their facial expressions. An eyebrow goes up. These little marks, these little wrinkles on my forehead, all the different things that might happen on my face that could express something. Someone who is perspiring in sort of greater or more than normal, but gestures, postures, all of these things communicate. And from this article about Zenger and Folkman, I'd say that about approximately 80% of communication comes from these nonverbal cues. So really important when we're in these spaces of coaching, we have to be attentive in such a way that we're not like totally tuned out of something. We have to stay present, be curious, and really understand and be aware of our own what we're doing. Level five, understanding emotions and feelings, how we think about the act of deep and authentic listening. So when I think about this, just being able to acknowledge that these emotions and feelings are present, being able to empathize, but being non-judgmental. Margaret McLean, who supported us many years in the school reform initiatives, was like, withhold judgment, presume good intentions. Understanding that we don't know where everybody's coming from or all their experiences. And then the last one, level six, is to be able to clarify assumptions. And this is how we ask questions, how we clarify. But are we willing and have we created this space where we can see issues from a new perspective, from a new light? Or are we so locked in tunnel vision that I know what has to happen and I can't possibly think of other things? So being able and willing to open ourselves up to say, I don't have all the answers. You have different students, you have a different classroom, it's a different context. I can't possibly know everything that's going on with a problem that you might be faced with. So levels of listening, really important. We also write about types of listening, student-focused coaching. So from cosmetic, where we might have really busy people who are doing a lot of other things other than being aligned and connected with me. They might be emailing, they might be cameras off, who knows what people are doing. So cosmetic listeners might often ask for you to repeat things, but they're really busy, sometimes multitasking. And we know where that gets most people. It's usually not a good thing. There's plenty of research would say that that's not a good thing. Not a good thing. However, some people might believe that they are the world's best multitasker. And you can say, okay, that's fine. That's what you believe. But the perception on the other side of the person being coached is that you are not present in this conversation. You have much more important things to be doing than to be focused in on me. Conversational listening, where we spend most of our time engaged, and that might be relationship building. Active listening, the work here of both the Growth Coaching International group in Australia and then STARS work in early 2000 would tell us that about 70% of our time, if we're active listening, would be just that, listening. 30% would be about these verbal responses. how we ask questions, how we paraphrase, how we summarize, etc. Deep listening. We would learn from these same groups that 90% of our time is spent listening. So deep listening. It's almost as though you're that person. It's empathy, empathizing with what another person is saying, really reading more of their nonverbal cues. But the deep listening could also be those things like those minimal encouragers, like, right, yes, we all have them. And then the authentic listener. Can you really go into a conversation with someone, a teacher, a group of teachers, and be willing to allow conversation to happen? Are you okay with going in and not being fearful that you're going to be judged? Authentic conversations require this time for us to be able to have that ownership, but it requires safety. Solar technique that Jan and I also write about, adapted from Egan and Reese. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list as we think about our own, how we do sit in a conversation, the posture we have, including our face, our eye contact, how we lean forward slightly, suggesting that we're in the conversation, but the calming, relaxed nature. So these are a few techniques for us to think about. Yeah, we also have to be really culturally aware of the individuals and who we're having conversations with. So this is not meant to be this exhaustive list. So if we're thinking about being a person who is active, deep, and authentic, then we can have empathy. We can postpone interpretation, suspend our judgments. We stay attentive, have patience, we're present and curious. We're curious through the questions we ask. And then those right, yes, minimal encouragers. Christian van Nurburg, who wrote about also in one of his books about what we should stop doing when we think about the quality of our own listening. And one of those is about planning how to respond. It's almost like when you think about, if I sit here and just plan what I'm going to say, what am I really doing to the rest of the conversation? Like, am I losing out on everything that else has been said? Just like teachers who use the ineffective practice around Robin reading. If you said, yep, you're going to be the third paragraph and you're going to read that. Well, if I'm not a strong reader, that might be where I spend my time practicing paragraph 3. So planning how to respond, never a good idea. You can't connect the dots. What to stop doing, completing sentences for other people. It's this assumption that you know what's in this person's head. It's an assumption that you know what they're going to say. Guessing at difficult words for some people can suggest impatience, that you got to hurry up and fill this in. Well, difficult words and multi-meaning words can, we know, mean a lot of things to different people. Comparing ourselves is never a good thing in a coaching conversation. It turns things on yourself as a coach. And comparing ourselves, I think as well, is one of these that Jim Knight recently talked about too in a webinar of how not necessarily comparing ourselves, but offering strategies and solutions to people as a coach that you then own it. So it's almost like comparing ourselves that I'm better than you are in a way, and I have this solution for you. Well, if you have the solution for me, you're not only owning it, you're also starting to create dependence for some people. So I thought that was really important of something that he recently said in this webinar, that just be cautious when you start to offer solutions and strategies and fixes, because you now own those as a coach. And you also start to create some dependency for some people that, if I'm challenged with something, well, I don't have to really think about it. I'm just going to go to the coach and he or she's going to tell me what to do. Competing, again, never a good thing. It's unhelpful in any coaching conversation to try to compete with others. Doodling, when you think about doodling, it's more about where are your eyes. When you think about doodling, looking down and not being present, and eye contact is so important in a coaching conversation. The looking at other things, because they're so distracting, can take your minds off or move you away from eye contact with the person whom you're coaching, to being distracted by movements in the hallways or other things that are happening. And then the last thing about fidgeting, when you think about fidgeting, if you take like a pen or something, you're just like tap, 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 or you're clicking on something constant. Some of those things about fidgeting that could, for some people, really suggest boredom, or in some cases, some of the impatience that they have. So verbal responses to some of these different nonverbal cues that are really important for us to be aware of and to think about is how we reflect on people's feelings and emotions. How do we paraphrase? What a great opportunity to model for other people how to paraphrase. It's a tricky skill for some people. So how do you pull and get succinct, but in your own words? Can be really tough, but we as coaches, if we practice this enough, we can be great models for others. How we question, clarify and open-ended questions are best. We're never trying to lead people to the place we want them to go. That's just like saying, I already have the solution for you. We just have to get here. You don't know all the things that someone has tried. How do you take all these little bits and pieces from a paraphrase to maybe pull together a really good summary? What are we going to do next? Where are we going from here? Or thinking about things in our communication and verbal responses, that jargon. I don't know if Jan, I can't remember if she talked a little bit about this last time about avoiding jargon, but just think if you're coming to, you have a teacher or a school reaching out to a parent to say, we want to schedule this ARD so that we can work through the IEP, and we have BOI data and we have MOI data. We will then look to compare, like just some of these acronyms that are used and thrown out that could be like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. So doing our best to avoid some of the different jargon. If we then were to think about here, that I think is another really important concept, is that if you get yourself to a place where, let's say through the collaborative problem solving process of what is this priority that we're really, really going to hone in on. And we're going to spend more time in a future session diving deeper in the collaborative problem solving process. But if you were to think right now about a specific area that you were going to target and really focus on, so something like vocabulary or inferencing or whatever that might be, writing summaries, solution focused coaching, solution focus, which is really therapy, is getting us to think about what do we want to achieve. And DeShazer and Berg in the 1970s talked about these three different questions that when we think about some of this work being solution focused, what's the miracle question? When we don't have problems with general academic vocabulary anymore, what's happening? And exception questions. Has there ever been a time when we've done really well in general academic vocabulary? If so, what was happening? What was going on? Or what about scaling? Scaling gets us to think about, wow, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being we've achieved what we set out to do, but 1 being we're just kind of getting started. We haven't done a whole lot. Like, where do you fall on that scale? Is it a 4? Is it a 6? And what gets you that high? What are you already doing? What's the evidence you have that you're already moving toward achieving a goal that you've set out to do? And maybe then a question as Hey Sun Moon says, is that what's good enough for you? If you get yourself to a 4 and you think, yeah, pretty routine, we're doing okay, that's good enough. We don't need to get better. Well, for some people, that might be their reality. But for others, there's a lot of learning that we can still do. So if we're thinking about in these roles, as we consider this, if we think about the roles that we have as coaches, and we think about just even as leaders, we have to think then about how do we model our own learning and expectations, and how do we create the conditions for successful learning and coaching. That's going to take a lot on us to really be able to do that. And so fewer things, the better, when we get prioritized, that we can model learning and we can create conditions. And that means making it visible to everyone out there that, hey, this is what I do in terms of my coaching process. Here are the tasks that I'm going to be doing. services I'll be providing, how I spend my day, and how I can be contacted. There are a few things here. This comes from chapter 12 in student-focused coaching, that when you get it, you might just mark this. This is one of the last pages in there, but a best practices checklist. We need the administrator and the coach working together. So this has to be communicated. In the slide, you'll see this is an example from the Euclid City Schools outside of Cleveland, where it's, what will the coach do? What are the responsibilities? What are the outcomes we should expect from the responsibilities? What are the examples? What are the non-examples? And then that has to be communicated to everyone. So who's going to do this in terms of communicating? Dr. Nick Philman from the state of Georgia, from the Georgia Department of Education, he took the 3 roles of student-focused coaching, facilitator, teacher, learner, collaborative problem solver, and put them in terms of responsibilities into these different buckets. So when we're collaborative problem solvers, this is what we're doing. When we're teacher learners, this is what I'm doing. There's also, if you have a priority and a focus, you could be tracking your time. Where do you spend most of your time as a coach? And we suggest, doing this maybe 3 times per year. And if you're tracking what it is that you're doing a couple times a year, you could then look to see, is where I'm spending my time, is that really also aligned to the priority we have? Or am I spending my times on things that are not really where we want to be doing this? So that's responsibilities. I'm going to jump forward here because of time. Just remembering here that focus is a prerequisite for improvement. That when we think of focus, student achievement gains are 5 times greater if we really think about how we align all the things that we're doing. When we think of walkthroughs to inform professional development and learning, not just for the sake of walkthroughs. Coaching dosage, not the set number of time, it's what's necessary. So you might think about these last few questions here to just consider as you move forward in your role as coach, as leader, whatever the role is what are you doing to create the conditions for sustained learning to occur? And how are you modeling your own learning and expectations for others? Because we can't know all of this, but we can know some of it. So I am going to jump through here because we are at the end. I do want to say that that time goes really, really fast. If you have questions specific to this, we can revisit a couple of those things from the very end there. But I can't stress enough: get focused, have a priority, use the student data and additional evidence to really set your plan of professional development and learning. I think you'll find it to be extremely important and valuable in your role.
Well, Dr. Michel, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And we are really looking forward to continuing this webinar series. Before we go, please do fill out this survey link that's in the chat, or you can grab the QR code that's right up here. We do have a few reminders before we go. If you are an LCRS site that did not request the student-focused coaching book during August's coach convening, please complete the book survey link, and we'll put that in the chat as well. Before you go, please do fill out our survey link as well. And I just want to thank Dr. Michel for that wonderful presentation that gets us started on thinking about student-focused coaching, and we can't wait to be part of this as we continue the series this year. I want to thank you for your time on behalf of Sacramento County Office of Education and the LCRSET Grant Initiative, as well as Glean Education. And thank you to our wonderful attendees. I am always amazed that you take all this time to spend with us to continue your learning and deepen your practice. We look forward to seeing you all again on November 7th, 2024 with Dr. Michel for our second webinar in the series. Thank you, everyone.